here and have a little party sometime. But it's kind of exciting to come here today from Clinton, Iowa, because on the way I passed by Wheatland, Iowa, where my grandparents lived, and so for me, this whole trip has just kind of been one big tour of where all my family grew up and where we went hunting and fishing and that kind of thing. So it's pretty exciting to me. But you know, people have often asked me why I support Andrew Yang, why I've decided to, be part of this man's crew, and it's a very simple thing. One of the signs you might see here behind me, and we don't have one here, but one of our phrases that we use on this campaign is called humanity first. That we put humans above profits, above big corporations, above pollutions and stuff like that. And that to me is really kind of who Andrew Yang is. And one of the best ways that I can demonstrate kind of who Andrew Yang is when it comes to humanity first came, in a little thing that we had called the Working Heroes Forum back in Des Moines, Iowa, with a guy some of you might know named J.D. Schulten. And, there were about 400 people there, and afterwards Andrew stopped and took pictures with everybody, which was really exciting. And so I was like, hey, Andrew, I'm hungry. I'm a big dude. We got to go get some dinner, man. But at the end of all that, there was one of our young volunteers who was like, hey, Al, I lost my cell phone. And Andrew looked at each and every one of us and said, guys, we have got to find this kid's cell phone. So not only did he have all of the staff walking up and down the aisles to find this kid's cell phone, Andrew Yang himself was walking up and down the aisles to find this kid's cell phone. And that meant a lot to me. That said a lot to me about who this man was. He's running for the presidency of the United States, one of the most important jobs you can think of in the world. And for him, one kid losing his cell phone meant that, I wanted to stop and I wanted to take some time to help this kid find his phone. And that to me really says humanity first. Everyone counts. But that's enough of me talking. I would like to introduce a young man some of you might know, Larry, the chair, and I will hand the mic over to him. Make sure I don't step on these two little kids.
Thank you, Al, and welcome again to all of you to Tipon, lovely town of Tipon, and the Oasis. It's a beautiful place, of course, to have an event like this, and it's really nice to see such a large crowd today. I am Larry Hutchins, Senior County Democratic Chair, and I've lived here all my life. As opposed to Al, my life's been a lot longer than Al's, so I've been here a lot longer than he's been around. So most of you are aware of who's coming today, who's going to be here. He's an entrepreneur that turned around and decided to invest a lot of his money in America. He started Ventures for America and has helped a lot of businesses get started. I am thinking about this. I've introduced a lot of people, candidates. I was really shocked when I first saw his math, M-A-T-H, because I saw that, like, what the heck does that possibly mean? And I found out it means make America think harder. Well, I got to thinking, which is what that's supposed to do. It's supposed to make you think, right? So I'm thinking, why didn't he make America think again? And then he could have done a little red hat with M-A-T-A on it, and he would have had a MATA hat. So, after introducing all the other candidates that I've introduced, I was thinking of something on the way over here, and I'll borrow a phrase. I think it's from Monty Python's Flying Circus. And now for something entirely different, Andrew Yang.
Hello, Tipton. How are you? It's great to be here. Thank you for the warm introduction, Alan and Larry. Ooh, a soapbox. Look at that. It's time to look taller. It's great to be here. This is my 24th trip to Iowa over the last number of months, and every time gets better and better because the energy's higher, the groups are bigger. My first crowd is not as big as this one. And the voting's closer and closer. We're only 4 weeks away from the caucus. And it does not feel like this, but you all are among the most powerful people in our country today. You have the future of the country in your hands. I've done the math. Do you know how many Californians each of you is worth? Well, you came to the right place then. Because you came here and became an Iowan. You now have super democratic powers. Each Iowan is worth about 1,000 Californians in terms of the power you have to shape the future of this country. How many of us are here in this cafe right now? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate. There are 400 of you here in this cafe. There are about 40 people in this room. But even that is the equivalent of one football stadium full of Californians. Right, that's the power you have. That's why it's a thrill and privilege to campaign here every single time. The question is, how are you going to use this power in 4 short weeks? And to me, you must use that power to help solve the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. Now, you all are Democrats for the most part. How did you react to when Donald Trump won in 2016? Tears, groan, sick, nausea, shock. I reacted the same way. I said, oh my gosh, the country just decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star as our president. And though I was shocked, we all had family members, friends, and neighbors who celebrated his victory. And I know that's true for all of you because Donald Trump won Iowa by more than 8 points. You have to ask, how the heck is that possible that he won the purplest of purple states, Iowa, by that much? If you were to turn on cable news at any point in the last several years, why would you think that Donald Trump is our president today? Russia. Hillary. Emails. Fox News. Deep state. Conspiracies. Racism. Ignorance. All of this been mashed together into some kind of toxic brew and said this is why. But I'm a numbers guy, as you can tell from the math lapel pin. And the story as to why he's our president is clear in the numbers. That we blasted away 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years. And where were those jobs? Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and more than 40,000 right here in Iowa. I have been to those towns here in Iowa, and after the manufacturing plant closed, the shopping district closes, people leave, the school shrinks, that community never recovers. I have seen that same story play out in Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, over the last 7 years running Venture for America, a nonprofit I started in 2010. And I have to say, first I just want to give a shout out to my wife because I was a pretty normal guy when I decided to start Venture for America. I was like, hey, how about I quit my job, start a nonprofit in one part of the country trying to help people grow businesses. She was a good sport about that. She was an even better sport when 7 years later, was like, hey, how about I run for president of the United States? And occasionally someone thanks me for running for president, and I say, thank my wife. Because 1, she let me run in the first place, and number 2, she's been sacrificing much more than anyone else while I've been away. So I started Venture for America, and I saw firsthand what happened in these manufacturing towns, and I saw that it led Trump to become our president. Where if you draw a line between industrial automation in a voting area and the movement towards Trump, it's like a straight line up to the right, if you look at the data. Unfortunately, what we did to those manufacturing jobs, we're now going to do to retail jobs, call center jobs, fast food jobs, and on through the economy. How many of you noticed stores closing around where you work in this part of Iowa? Stores closing? Why are the stores closing? Online shopping. In a word, Amazon. Amazon soaking up $20 billion in business every single year, causing 30% of your stores and malls to close forever. Most common job, ooh, loud. Most common job in our country is retail clerk. Average retail clerk is a 39-year-old woman making between $8 and $10 an hour. What is her next move when the store or mall closes? How much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? Zero. That is your math. 20 billion out, 30% of your stores close, you get 0 back. You've all seen the self-serve kiosks in the CVS, the grocery store, the fast food restaurant, but it's not just the obvious changes we can all see in front of our eyes. When you all call the customer service line of the big company and you get the bot or software, I'm sure you do the same thing I do, which is you pound 000, say human, representative, until you get someone on the line, right? Raise your hand if that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all do that because we hate that software, it's terrible. But in 2 or 3 short years, the software is going to sound like this. Hello Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, delightful, a little bit overly friendly, perhaps. What is that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers right now, making between $10 and $14 an hour? The rubber is really going to hit the road when the robot trucks hit our highways. How many of you know a truck driver here in Iowa? 3.5 million truckers in this country. And my friends in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. They say they're 98% of the way there. If you doubt that this is coming, a robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania 3 weeks ago, free of human intervention. Why butter? I have no idea. But if you Google robot butter truck, you'll see. Maybe they had a big stack of pancakes. What is this going to mean for the 3.5 million truckers or the 7 million Americans who work at truck stops, motels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal every day? How many of you have been to Iowa 80 in Davenport? It says 5,000 people stop there every day. What will that number be when the trucks don't have drivers? This is the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the 4th Industrial Revolution. When's the last time you heard a politician say 4th Industrial Revolution? 3 seconds ago. And I'm barely a politician. So I was seeing all of this in 2017. Trump wins. I have a, oh my gosh, I should really dig into why he won. I see the information, I see, okay, 4th Industrial Revolution, 4 million manufacturing jobs accelerating, 30% of stores and malls closed, most common jobs in our country are going to disappear. And I went to our leaders in DC and I said to them, what are we going to do to help our people manage this transition? And what do you think the folks in DC said to me when I said, what are we going to do?
We can't talk about that.
Someone just made the same noise. So earlier, this trip in Iowa, someone made the Scooby-Doo noise. They're like, oh. So the 3 answers I got out of DC were, number 1, we can't talk about this. Number 2, we should study this further. And number 3, we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. How many of you heard someone say something like that last one, right? Yeah. Educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. It sounds pretty good. But I'm the numbers guy. I said, hey, I looked at the studies. You all want to guess how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest? 10%. That's a very good guess. I anchored you low, because it is low. The real number is 0 to 15%. They're a total dud. The reality is half of those manufacturing workers who lost their jobs never worked again. And of that group, half filed for disability. You then saw a surge in suicides and drug overdoses in those communities, to the point where America's life expectancy has now declined for the last 3 years in a row. You all know the last time America's life expectancy declined 3 years in a row? World War II is a very good guess, but you have to go back further than that. The Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic that killed millions. That's the last time America's life expectancy declined like this. It's highly unusual in a developed country for your life expectancy to ever decline. Ordinarily, you get richer, stronger, healthier, and everything just keeps on edging up. But here in the U.S., we've gone down and then down and then down again. So when I said this to the folks in D.C., they said, well, I guess we'll get better at retraining then. And then just went back to what they were doing. And one person said something that brought me here to you all today. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here is going to do anything about this. Because fundamentally, this is a town of followers, not leaders. And in order for us to do anything about this, you would have to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back in 2 years. Because that conversation was 2 years ago, and here we are. Woo! You all are part of that wave that will rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy, to work for us, to work for you, to work for our families, to work for people. I'm here now, totally anonymous a year ago, and now I'm fifth in the polls to become the Democratic nominee and rising very, very fast. My campaign raised $16.5 million last quarter in increments of only $35 each. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But there are an awful lot of them. Zero corporate PAC money, no wine caves. No offense to anyone. All grassroots, people-powered donations. Because this is our chance to retake our government and make it work for us. Most Americans look up and they see the government pipes as clogged full of lobbyist cash, millions and millions of dollars, and they despair there's nothing they can do about it. They're generally right, there's nothing they can do about it. It's up to you all to flush the pipes clean. In 4 weeks. That's the magic. That's the power. So the question is, how will we rewrite the rules to work for you? If you're here today, you heard at some point that there's a man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. Remember when you heard that? And the first time you heard it, I know you thought that's a gimmick, that will never happen, this is too good to be true. But this is not my idea and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of our country, called it the Citizens' Dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King fought for this in the 1960s, and it is what he was fighting for when he was killed in 1968. I know this in part because I sat down with Martin Luther King's son in Atlanta, and he said this is what his father was fighting for when he was assassinated. It was so mainstream in the 60s that 1,000 economists, including Milton Friedman, one of the fathers of modern economic theory, endorsed this plan. It passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon, and then 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? Alaska. And how do they pay for it? Oil. And what is the oil of the 21st century? Technology, software, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out that said that our data is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? If our data is somehow now worth billions of dollars, where is all that money going? That's right. Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, and the trillion-dollar tech companies that are paying zero or near zero in taxes. Do you see how this works, Iowa? You get sucked dry, your neighborhoods get depleted, your stores close, the biggest winners in this economy pay nothing. That is what you're here to change. That's what you're going to use your power for. Jeff Bezos is worth $115 billion today, post-divorce. Do we think it's appropriate that his trillion-dollar tech company pays less in taxes than everyone who's here today? Is that Amazon's fault? No, that's our fault. We have to be pretty dumb to let them get away with paying zero in taxes. If we get our people our tiny, tiny fair share of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, eventually every robot truck mile and AI work unit, we can easily afford $1,000 a month for everyone in our country. Particularly because when this money is in your hands, where will it go? How will you spend it? How much of it will stay right here in Iowa? Most of it. Not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password instead of sharing all the time. But most of the money would go to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, and Little League sign-ups, and this coffee shop, and local nonprofits, and maybe Democratic Party dues, and religious organizations. This is the trickle-up economy, from our people, our families, and our communities up. This would give every American, particularly those in rural areas or places that are getting blasted by automation, a real path forward. This is the economy you can create and make real in just 1 month. And this money, as it makes you and your family stronger, healthier, mentally healthier, improves people's decision making, improves people's optimism, You just heard from Kyle Christensen, right? And Kyle is, where'd Kyle go? Did he already drive away and do something?
Watching the live stream.
Oh, that's cool. So Kyle's one of maybe 15 or 14 or 13 families around the country we're giving $1,000 a month to. And there's an abstract argument you can make, be like, hey, everyone should have this foundation. And then when you see it in real life with Kyle and his mom, or Jodie Fassey and her daughter, or Mallory Shannon, or all of these families around the country, you see that $1,000 a month is a game changer for many of us, because it helps take the boot off of our throats and gives people a chance to breathe and think more clearly, make the kind of decisions that they want to make, do the kind of work that they want to do. Right now we're getting beaten over the head with the fact that things are great in our economic measurements. GDP record highs, corporate profits record highs, stock market prices record highs, headline unemployment record lows, and yet we have this sinking feeling that things are not great. Corporate profits are at record highs, yes. You know what else are at record highs right now in the United States of America? Suicides, drug overdoses, stress, mental illness, student loan debt, financial insecurity. You know what are at record lows in the United States? Starting a business, getting married, having children. Anything that's a sustained act of optimism is now at record lows in the United States of America. If you have record high corporate profits and your life expectancy is going down, which do you listen to? We know which one DC is listening to. DC can't even see the people. All they can see is the corporate profits. Washington, D.C. today is the richest city in our country. What do they produce? That's a thinker, right? Whatever they produce, business is awfully good. Donald Trump said he wanted to drain the swamp. I want to do something different. I want to distribute the swamp. Why are we employing hundreds of thousands of people in the most expensive city in our country? We should be moving those agencies and personnel and jobs to Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, Florida. It would save us billions of dollars immediately because the cost would be much lower. And I would argue that their decisions would be better because they would live someplace normal among people as opposed to in the DC bubble. So we have these economic measurements that are leading us off a cliff, and we need to redefine them very, very quickly. Robot trucks will be great for corporate profits and GDP, but they'll be terrible for many Americans. What we have to do is start measuring how we're doing by how we're actually doing. Things like our health and life expectancy, the ability to retire in quality circumstances, and this freedom dividend stacks on top of Social Security because we know you cannot retire on Social Security benefits, and this would give Americans a real chance to retire in quality circumstances. How our kids are doing, clean air and clean water, mental health and freedom from substance abuse. These are the real numbers that we should be measuring our progress with, and as your president, I would change our measurements to these numbers and then present them to you every year at the State of the Union. I'd be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck at the State of the Union. And I know how wrong these numbers are in part because of my own family. My wife is at home with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic. What is her work included at in our economic measurements every day or every year? 0. And it's not just her and stay-at-home parents here in Iowa and around the country. It's people like Kyle who are taking care of ailing loved ones. It's nurturers, it's volunteers, it's coaches and mentors, it's artists most all of the time. It's journalists increasingly. We have zeroed out 2,000 local newspapers in this country, causing local news deserts all over the country. And I'm going to ask you all, how can you have a functioning democracy if you don't have any news in your town? If you believe in democracy, you actually need to have a local paper so that people have some information about how they're voting. These are the things that we claim to value most highly in our country. Our families, our community, democracy, and they're getting zeroed out one by one. What you have to take to the rest of the country in 4 weeks is this idea that economic value and human value are not the same things. That we have intrinsic value as citizens, as Americans, and as human beings. If you take that message to the rest of the country, it will catch on like wildfire, I guarantee you. because the folks in New Hampshire are waiting for the baton. I was just there. There's a lot of enthusiasm and energy around this message in New Hampshire, but you have to make the case for it to the country on February 3rd by caucusing for it. Donald Trump is our president today because he had a very clear set of ideas. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response? America's already great. Remember that? It's been a long 3 years, I know. But it is about to come to an end.
Yes.
That response did not work because the problems are real. The suffering is real. How many of you all are parents like me? If you're a parent like me, you've had this sinking feeling for quite some time that our kids are inheriting a future that is not as bright as the lives that we have led as their parents. I don't want to, you don't have to acknowledge that, but you've all thought that, I know, because I'm a parent and I've thought that. And that is true in the numbers. If you were born in this country in the 1940s, first, congratulations. But if you were born in the 1940s in this country, there's a 93% chance that you're going to be better off than your parents were. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here. That's what's worked for this country for so long. If you were born in the 1990s, which I sense that some of you were, you're down to a 50-50 shot and it's declining fast. That is why we feel the way we do, because we are leaving a future that is far darker for our kids than they deserve. I'm running for president not because I dreamt about being president of the United States. I'm running for president because, like so many of you here in this room today, I'm a parent and a patriot. I have seen the future that lies ahead for our kids, and it is not something I'm willing to accept. They deserve better than this. Woo! And you alone in the entire country can change it. You and you alone can rewrite the rules of this 21st century economy to work for our children, so you can look them in the eyes and say, we did all we could. Donald Trump made this simple case that he was going to make America great again, and he was right about the problems. The problems are real. But his solutions were the opposite of what we need. What were his solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. Iowa, we need to do the opposite of these things. We need to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of this time. We have to evolve in the way we think about ourselves and our work and our value. I am the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thanks very much. Thank you so much. I'd love to take some questions. Yes?
You said about our fourth industrial revolution and how Washington's not addressing it. Aside from this $1,000 a month, what would be your plan to address this? How do we move forward and find jobs for all these people who are losing jobs?
Thanks for the question. I did write a book about a whole suite of things that we need to do, but I'm going to give you the high-level version. Number one, this $1,000 a month, it's not just for individuals. If you imagine this town with an extra $1,000 a month, how many people live in this town? 3,200. So let's say there was another $32 million in disposable income flowing through this town every day. And it was going to this coffee shop, the garage, the daycare center, the tutoring service, the nonprofit. Then each of these businesses might need to hire another person or two. You end up creating jobs right where people work and live. And you also end up spurring creativity and entrepreneurship because someone would be much more likely to start something new if there was an extra $32 million circulating through the economy, and they knew that if their business did not work out, they wouldn't starve to death. They'd be okay. So the freedom dividend is a huge foundation for a different kind of economy that actually resembles our community's needs and values. But we can't stop there. We have to do more. You redefine our economic measurements so that people can see what the real problems are, and you see that we're in a mental health crisis, we're in a wellness recession, and then you start trying to solve those problems in a meaningful way. You reform our educational system so that people have access to the kinds of opportunities that will exist for a long time. We have to stop pretending that college is for everyone in this country. Only a third of Americans are going to go to college. We need to invest in technical trade vocational programs at the high school level. Right now, only 6% of American high school students are in a technical or vocational track. In Germany, that percentage is 59. Think about that gulf. And these are among the most resilient jobs that are going to be with us for years. Can you imagine what it would take to have a robot plumber or a robot HVAC repair person?
A robot childcare provider?
A robot childcare provider? Yeah, those jobs will be with us for a long time. So if we invest in those vocational programs, then we can prepare people for an economy that will be with us for decades to come. So those are some of the big moves I would make, but it starts with redefining our economic measurements to revolve around us and not the corporate bottom line. And I'll give you a couple of anecdotes. I spoke to 70 CEOs in New York City, and I asked them how many were looking at replacing their back office clerical workers with software and AI. Guess how many hands went up out of 70? All 70. Because if they didn't have their hand up, they could be fired the next quarter. Every CEO's incentives are just to maximize the bottom line, and the bottom line and our communities are now diverging in dramatic ways, and we have to line them up as quickly as possible. But thanks for the question. It's the right one. Sir?
How do you propose getting cooperation to do these things? How are you going to get the people, the haves, to cooperate so that the have-nots can meet?
If you didn't hear, he said, how can we get everyone to cooperate in this vision and get the haves to care about the have-nots was what he concluded with. So I'm not the only person who's looked at the numbers in our economy and concluded we need to change something very, very dramatically. Anyone else has looked at it and said the same thing? Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, biggest bank in the country. He looked at the numbers and said we should declare a national emergency around the fact that the U.S. economy is not working for most Americans. And then he said we should have a negative income tax, which is an income floor for all Americans. Does that sound familiar? So this is not the far-out futurist Asian man candidate. Like, this is like the CEO of JP Morgan Chase who looked at the same numbers and made the same conclusion. If you imagine a country where we all have an extra $12,000 a year to spend, is that good for JP Morgan Chase? Is that good for Amazon? Is that good for AT&T? Like, all of the companies actually win if we get this money into our hands. It creates a virtuous cycle. It's bad for them if the middle class disappears in this country, which it is. So if you look at my plan, there are many people who are at the top of the economic ladder who concluded that this is the right approach. I've been endorsed by Elon Musk and many of like the prominent tech CEOs, and you would think that some of them would be like, wait a minute, like, you know, this might mean money out of my pocket. But they're smart enough to see that this is a win for everyone. And the greatest thing, it's a win for us, our families, our communities, because all the money would flow through our hands and make us stronger, healthier, better educated, and everything else that we want. The big guys don't lose through this. You have a follow-up?
Well, I'm just wondering, do you think that unions are obsolete? Because we wouldn't really need unions if business owners and people with money would cooperate. And that's the only reason there's a middle class anyway, is because of unions. I'm speaking from experience.
I agree. Unions have been a historic force for good in terms of worker treatment and compensation and benefits. The middle class may not exist at all if not for unions. I'm pro-union. This money in our hands actually strengthens workers' ability to negotiate, and I know this because this plan was championed by a guy named Andy Stern, who used to run the biggest labor union in the country, the SEIU. And he said that if you had this money in workers' hands, all of a sudden every union could negotiate much, much harder, because they know if they do end up calling a strike, then people can go home and not feel like they're going to eat into their savings like as quickly. That you actually can survive for longer if push comes to shove. Unions have been an historic force for good, like a fortress against a storm, but the fact is the fortress has shrunk over the last number of years and the storm has gotten stronger. So this is the game changer for workers' rights and empowerment that will enable the fortress to start growing again.
Question?
Sure.
Hi, Mr. Yang. I appreciate your very creative financial, economic Iran problem and our shooting from the hip president we've got right now?
I was one of the candidates who just immediately called this out as a grievous mistake, because 78% of Americans want nothing to do with a war in Iran. What does our Constitution say? It will be an act of Congress to declare war. And unfortunately, Congress has ceded that authority to the President over the last 19 years with the AUMF. It's why we've been in a constant state of armed conflict for almost 2 decades and counting. As your President, I would pull us back from the brink of war in Iran. I would repeal the AUMF and say it is for Congress to declare war, as it was framed in the Constitution. I've signed a pledge to end the forever wars because I know Americans do not want to be in a constant state of armed conflict. We spent over $1 trillion in Iraq, $6 trillion in the Middle East, and I've talked to hundreds, even thousands of veterans who've struggled with health issues and PTSD and finding a path forward after they return. We have to stop paying this price and use these resources to make our communities stronger and more whole, and then invest in diplomacy and our historic partnerships and alliances abroad. It was James Mattis who said that if you spend more on diplomats, you spend less on ammunition, and that is exactly where I would lead us as president. You look like a reporter?
Hi, my name is Lauren Tarudia, and I'm with USC Annenberg Media. So we are actually, there are some Californians here today.
You're welcome.
So I don't know if your count might have to go a little bit down, but I wanted to ask you if you thought that your healthcare plan of Medicare for All is a little bit confusing to some voters, just because it's very different than the Medicare for All that Senator Sanders presents.
Thanks for the question, Lauren, and I welcome you from California as
Thank
well.
you.
I know we all do. I'm for universal health care. We should have health care as a basic right of citizenship in this country. The main way I differ from Bernie and Elizabeth on this is I would not legislate away private insurance. I think that millions of Americans enjoy their plans, and many through unions ended up negotiating away wages in order to have better health care benefits. So to me, it has to be for the government to provide this insurance coverage to the public and then demonstrate that it's better than private plans over time to consumers. But our current plan is not working, our current healthcare system is not working because it's not designed to make us stronger and healthier. We're spending $3.6 trillion on our healthcare, twice as much as other countries, to worse results. And the system is not designed to make us stronger, it's designed to make money for the drug companies, the device companies, the private insurance companies. It does a great job of those things. Has anyone here ever gotten a letter from their private insurance company, great news, your rates are going to be lower this year? No American has ever gotten that letter. Because their business model is just to ratchet up prices every single year, and it's reached such an extreme that it's breaking our backs. It's the #1 cause of bankruptcy. On the economic front, it keeps us from changing jobs. Certainly makes it 10 times harder to start a business, because if you don't have health care, how are you going to ever go off on your own? So this is what we need to change. We need to get our health care off of the backs of families and then free us up to do the kind of work that we want to do. And I'm the numbers guy. Anyone who talks about like how are you going to pay for this doesn't know what they're talking about, because we're already paying for it. We're paying for it through the nose, higher prices, every job's a temp job because no one wants to give you benefits. There are so many prices baked into the current way we do healthcare that we can't help but save money as long as we get in there and have the government fighting for lower costs and higher access. On the prescription drug front too, this is one of the things that voters talk to me all the time, like why the heck are prescription drugs so expensive? Why are we paying 2, 3, 4 times as much for our drugs as citizens of other countries for the same drugs that we help subsidize? And the reason we are paying so much for it is that the lobbyists are so powerful that they have kept our government from negotiating for lower prices on behalf of the American people. I don't know if you all knew that. So I've got a 5-part plan to get the prescription drug prices down. Number 1, of course the government has to be able to negotiate for lower prices on our behalf. Number 2, companies cannot charge us more than they charge citizens of other countries. Very reasonable. Number 3, if they fail at number 2, we can forcibly license that drug. And number 4, we have a public manufacturing facility where we can manufacture that drug. Number 5, we're allowed to import drugs from other countries. Do you think this plan would bring prices down? Yes. This is the only way we can bring prices down because the drug companies only understand one language, and that's dollars and cents. You can stand outside their buildings every day and say, do the right thing, and it would not matter. They're going to get paid tens of millions of dollars to gouge us. And I know they're gouging us because I had a friend who's a financial genius look through the numbers of these companies and the businesses, and she said she has never seen profiteering and price gouging at this level in her life. And that it's so unsustainable. She said she's now going to bet against those companies and support my campaign for president to try and make it right. Sir?
According to your wiki page, your parents met at Berkeley,
Yeah, that's right.
and they're both from Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that that would give you a unique perspective growing up as an Asian American in terms of looking at the whole American promise. Could you talk about that?
I've never gotten that question, but I quite love it. So my parents met as graduate students at UC Berkeley in the 60s. My father went on to get his PhD in physics. When I was a kid, I thought that everyone's dad had a PhD. So I was walking around being like, what's your dad's PhD in? And then someone was like, this is what his PhD was in. So he learned. So I grew up one of the lone Asian kids in my upstate New York town. And this was the 80s, so there were only 3 TV networks, and then we had the 4th Fox, you know, remember that? And so there was like a bit of an American culture that I always wanted to join. And whenever there was an Asian American on TV, I would jump up and down and run and get my family and be like, look, like someone Asian on TV. And it was always Connie Chung. And my parents got kind of tired of getting dragged to see Connie Chung on TV. So I love this country because it's given so much to my family and me. And my parents immigrated here to create a better future for me and my brother, and it totally worked. I mean, I'm running for president, so there's that. But my brother's a professor, you know, like I now have a niece and 2 beautiful boys. And I feel like my family also gave as good as it got to this country, and here's what I mean. So my father ended up generating 69 US patents for GE and IBM over his career. And when I was old enough to know what a patent was, I went to my dad. I was maybe like 13 or 14. I was like, how much do you get paid when you generate a patent? I was like waiting for like a big amount. And then he said, I get paid about $200. And I was like, that doesn't seem like very much. And he said, I also get a salary so I can feed, house, and clothe you and your brother. And I said, oh, I understand the deal now. But I say this because I feel like that was a good deal for the country. Because my dad generated 69 US patents for 2 great American companies over his career. And it was a great deal for my family. Everyone won. So this is the American dream in action, and we have to let people know that this is still the place you want to come if you want to start a life, have a family, start a business, do all these things that keep our country dynamic and competitive. If we lose that, then we're going to really lose the edge that has helped to fuel this country over the last number of decades. And as your president, it will be my pleasure to make the case to the rest of the world that this is still the place to be to live the American dream. And that if you come here, your son or daughter could wind up being president of the United States.
We have a mom over here trying to ask a question for a while now. She's juggling 2 kids.
No, sorry, I was gonna ask a question about Medicare, but then our friendly reporter asked it, so.
I saw your hand jump up a few times.
Oh, thank you for looking out for her, though. I appreciate it. We've got some questions over here. Miss?
Yes, I haven't been called that in a long time. Thanks. I got some numbers for you. We import nearly 90% of the food we eat here in Iowa. We export nearly 99% of what we grow. Our farms are getting bigger, and land prices have quadrupled in the last 25 years. We have a whole generation of people who want to come out and farm. A lot of them want to grow healthy food for their communities, and they don't have a prayer because they can't even get on the landscape. Now, aside from your dividend, what would you do to help rebuild rural economies and help these young entrepreneurs get out there and grow food for their family?
This is a tremendous question. I've heard it here in Iowa where the farms have gotten consolidated into these huge corporations, and then the huge corporations have these cost advantages that make it very difficult for family farms to compete. And then if the family farm wants to pass it on to the next generation, then that creates a whole host of problems. So what we need to do is try and level the playing field so that the individual family farm has a fighting chance. So I would put tax incentives in place that help balance the prices so that if you're a smaller farm, you actually can compete in some real way against the big guys. That if they have these low cost and cost advantages, then we have to try and balance that out for you all. Because to me, having consolidation in our agricultural production is not a positive thing for the U.S. In my opinion, small family farms need to be part of the process moving forward because a lot of that food, you'll have different types of food being grown, much more sustainable practices in at least some cases. And ideally, it can be healthier organic food that doesn't have the same processes that some of the biggest producers are using right now. But I'm a huge fan of what's happening in some of the more artisanal food communities. We need to make that more realistic because right now the market is all for the big guys. And it's not just agriculture. We could pretty much say that same story in just about any industry. Where like the big guys are just dominating everything. This is one reason, and so I'm an entrepreneur, and one of the things I'm most passionate about is that people aren't able to start businesses or farms anymore. That a couple of generations ago, you might have started a business, but now we talk about how the internet is enabling entrepreneurship. It's not. Like 2 generations ago, you might have opened a flower shop or a hardware store or a local toy store, but now none of those things make sense because Amazon's there just hovering over things, being like, hey, if you want to sell something, I'll just undersell you immediately. And so we have to create a real pathway for people to be able to start businesses and farms and do the kind of work that they want to do. And it's not going to happen on its own because the market is becoming more and more extreme and winner take all. And this is driving our culture, this is driving our politics, this is driving a lot of our biggest problems right now. Miss?
Can you talk about your value-added tax, how that implementation?
Sure, so the way we get the money from the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Googles of the world is you have to look around at the rest of the world. A lot of the other countries have looked at the same pattern and said, how do we make sure that we don't have our biggest companies paying zero back into the economy? And so what they did is they set up something called a value-added tax, which is like a toll at the point of sale that the company can't avoid. And one of the things I love about a value-added tax, you can ratchet it up on things that you want to target. Let's call it artificial intelligence, yachts, and luxury watches. And then you can ratchet it down or even exempt things that everyday people consume. Let's call it diapers and milk and toilet paper. And so then you can target things that you know are being consumed by the people who have the most or the companies that have the most. Right now our biggest companies are playing games with our income tax system. I'm going to use a couple of examples just for fun. So I just commented that Jeff Bezos is worth $115 billion, which he is. If I were to ratchet the income tax up to 75, 80%, how much of his $115 billion would I get next year? Zero, because he's not dumb enough to pay himself $10 billion a year. Like he just pays himself, let's call it $10 million a year, and then he has all these billions like sitting around in Amazon holdings. So if you have this value-added tax, you get the money from his $1 trillion tech company while it's coming in. And then when he takes $1 billion out of his wealth every year to buy rocket ships to Mars, which is what he does, by the way, you could have a big value-added tax on rocket ships to Mars. And then you take that money, put it into our hands, make us stronger, healthier, and more excited about the future. That is the plan. There was a joke that Willie Sutton, the bank robber, told. He said, why did I rob the banks? Because that's where the money is. We have to go to where the money is going, Iowa. The money's not staying here in your communities, and it's wrong. We have to go get it, return it to you, and everyone will win. I had a couple questions over there. I feel like I don't know. They're smiling at me. So yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So what kind of policies or programs are you and
that's happening where we're having worsening storms, which is affecting our crops each year, which is, we're also going to be having sea level rise, we're having just an assortment of things that are honestly going to affect the lowest people first, the worst, and then just going to keep going up.
How many of you all are concerned about climate change? Yes. You don't have your hand up. I don't know what to tell you. The biggest frustration I have is when politicians talk about climate change as something in the future we must prevent. Climate change is already here. Climate change has been with us for years. The last 4 years have been the 4 warmest years in recorded history. You all experienced historic floods that were fueled by climate change. How many of you saw the images from the wildfire in Australia right now? Does that look normal to you all? That looks like a scene right out of The Day After Tomorrow, one of those science fiction movies. And unfortunately, we know what movie you like. If you think about how much carbon is in that plume of smoke, that's like the biggest exhaust pipe we've ever seen out of Mother Nature. So climate change is here with us right now, and instead of pretending we're going to prevent it, we have to start investing hundreds of billions of dollars to make our communities stronger and more resilient and safer right now. It will save us money anyway because it's cheaper to build a more resilient infrastructure than it is to clean up after the disaster. And this is one thing I cannot believe Trump got right. I thought at least he would build bridges and roads and infrastructure just so he could put his name on them. I was willing to accept Trump Highway just to have the highway, or the bridge, or the levee, or the seawall, or whatever it was. But he just left us more to do. So we have to start making these investments immediately and not leave communities on your own. Because like you said, it's the poorest among us who are going to get hurt the most. We do need to move towards renewable sources of energy, wind and solar, and then subsidize that not just here but in other parts of the world. But realistically, this country is only 15% of carbon emissions. So even if we were to go to zero tomorrow, the world would continue to warm. So we have to stop pretending that we can prevent it and start acknowledging that we're on the curve right now and help make our communities stronger, safer, more resilient. It would create hundreds of thousands of new jobs to invest in our communities, and we should do so immediately. All right, Tipon, I think it's selfie time. I think that's right. We're going to do some selfies. Let's make history together in 4 short weeks. Thank you all so much.